Back in the old days, this part of the world used to be the economic superpower of the planet. There were dynasties that discovered everything from the compass to printing to making paper to gunpowder. They would lead huge expeditions around the globe. This was China, the Middle Kingdom, and right next door, India. This was the center of the global economic universe. But around the 1800s, that started changing. Over here in Europe and the United States, there was a major revolution that started taking place. Science, then machines, then weapons, trains, cars, flight, bombs, factories, cities. And with their new power, these countries started to expand to take over large swaths of the map. China remained a great civilization, but as the West started showing up, knocking on China's door with their big guns, China couldn't really match their firepower, and they had to concede land to Britain, which is how we got Hong Kong. The Industrial Revolution didn't really happen in China the same way it did in the West. And by the middle of the 1800s, China began a massive decline in its economic standing in the world. A century later, that situation got way worse, as China was invaded by its neighbor, Japan. China's economy was no longer the prosperous Middle Kingdom, but rather a shadow of itself, a poor country that was being occupied by outsiders. Once World War II was over, the West devised a new global economic and financial system. It was modeled after the economic system that was working so well in the West. Capitalism, free enterprise, still with some government oversight and high taxes for the rich and corporations, but it was still capitalism. And after the war, this capitalism would go on to become a miracle for many countries, rebuilding Germany, France, Japan. For many in the West, post-World War II capitalism was like a magic elixir that was fixing everything. It was working so well that more and more people started to believe that we needed to get government out of capitalism and let the market just do its thing. One of the major advocates for this idea of unfettered capitalism was this guy.
There has never in history been a more effective machine for eliminating poverty than the free enterprise system and the free market.
A Chicago-based economist named Milton Friedman.
If they fail, they bear the cost. If they succeed, they get the benefit.
The idea at the core of this financial and economic system was that companies would get investment from people who own shares in that company, we call this a corporation, and that the sole purpose of this corporation was to make money for these owners or these shareholders. In Milton Friedman's own words, quote, "The social responsibility of a business is to increase profits. That is the role of a business. Increasing short-term gains for shareholders would benefit all of society, according to this model." And if you look at the data in the United States and the West, Milton Friedman sort of had a point. And it led to huge prosperity in the West as the US economy exploded. Wait a minute, but what about China? Are we talking about China and its economy? You know, the Middle Kingdom, China? So while the US and Western economies are thriving because of this corporate free market capitalism that was taking over the world, China was descending further and further into decline. Instead of joining the capitalism party that the West was spreading throughout the world, China resisted, turning to a one-party rule communist system headed by this guy, Mao Zedong, who destroyed any chance of China's economy ever joining the prosperity happening around the world. By the 1970s, China was a place of widespread poverty. The once prosperous kingdom had reached rock bottom. But that was all about to change. So it's the 1970s, and this is China's new leader.
So is Johnny welcoming Deng into his home, dude? Is he like a Dengist? Like what's
Deng Xiaoping. He came into power hoping to turn around this 150 years of humiliation in China, the decline of China as a superpower. Elsewhere in the region, China's neighbors had economies that joined the global economic party that was happening in capitalism, and they were thriving. They saw immense economic miracles and pulled millions out of poverty. Deng specifically went on a visit to Singapore early on in his term, where ethnic Chinese had adopted the free market and they were thriving. He felt inspired. The Maoist economic doctrine that had failed was over, and it was time to see if China could rebuild its economy, experiment.
I'll go back to the fucking CNBC interview when they're interviewing the Robinhood CEO. Okay, I will go back there.
Experimenting with some version of capitalism. But he had to do this carefully, so as not to disrupt the one-party rule that China had created. So he decided to just focus on one little village, a sleepy village in southern China of just around 30,000 people, right across the border from the British-controlled Hong Kong, which at the time was thriving because of its hardcore capitalistic economy. Deng Xiaoping designated this little town as, quote, a special economic zone, where foreign companies could set up and invest in a very capitalistic free market. Hong Kong would sort of act as a bridge between Western businesses and this little gateway into communist China. It was still socialism, but with some Chinese capitalistic characteristics. What happens next is arguably the most mind-blowing economic miracle ever to have taken place on planet Earth. This little sleepy village that was the special economic zone in China exploded from a little fishing village with little more than a few thousand people and some rice paddies to a massive city of over 10 million people. The average income went from $1 a day to over $30,000 a year. This starts happening all over China. And meanwhile,
the thing is, like, the thing that I don't understand, whenever people talk about like foreign capital coming in and how they say like it's a product of capitalism, that foreign capital came in, or that capitalism uplifted China. I mean, it doesn't matter where the fucking capital is coming from. The reason why the country started advancing was because there was money. If you don't have money, it doesn't matter where you're getting it from. It doesn't matter what the purpose is of why you're getting it from. If you fucking open up the money faucet, then yeah, no shit, the country is going to start to advance. It's what you do with that money that is I think important. If you are able to throw your labor force at the problem as an infinite resource, pretty much, but then take the gains and distribute it evenly in comparison to how other countries that have more limited avenues of distribution as a consequence of IMF loans, then you're going to get China. You're going to get China's growth and prosperity. If you get money, but it's conditional aid, and that money is on the condition that you can only use it on other foreign companies that are coming into your country, and that condition is that you have to implement like rigorous austerity measures, then you're going to get literally every fucking country in the global south. So it's not necessarily capitalism that uplifts. It's not capitalism that uplifts the country. It's money and what you are allowed to do with that money. You get it? Since when was the Impossible Missions Force giving out loans? You're 100% correct. Problem is the CCP does not do anything of what you're talking about. The original investment and growth in China, and it still continues to this day, is still way more evenly distributed than what the conditional loans that IMF enforced on other developing nations, similar developing nations. That's the big difference. The USSR didn't invest in China, though. It was Western capitalist countries. Yes, and that is the grand That is the fucking grand gamble that paid off in dividends for Deng. You clearly never visited. Everything I'm talking about in regards to Chinese improvement, everything I'm talking about in regards to improvement in mainland China or in China in general, revolves around where certain conditions were in comparison to where they're at now. I'm not comparing Chinese growth, or I'm not comparing where China is now in rural areas to like fucking Western Europe. Okay? That would be a silly comparison. I'm comparing where China was in rural areas, just like he did, like the fishing village that he's referencing here, turning from a fucking fishing village to a gigantic trade hub, is the perfect example, and is what I'm basing my opinion off of. Why does it seem so difficult to say China has good things with their economy and growth? Western liberals seem to ignore the social programs that have proven success in China. Because it's a foreign adversary, and every single person that lives in the West still believes in Western supremacy, whether they like to admit it or not, and they see China as like the unknown factor, another world superpower that is engaging in, I guess not engaging in, but like they're actively trying to become a hegemonic global superpower, and they are very successful in that. So of course, people are still reasonably suspicious or have a fear of the unknown. That's what it is. And there's also very legitimate criticisms that you can launch against that global superpower. He's talking about you in this rant about a guy stating historical facts? Wait, what? China's committing human rights crimes. They're harvesting organs from prisoners. We have work camps. Why should we have what? That would be like praising the Nazis for giving people free Volkswagens. No, it would be like praising America while they still have Guantanamo Bay open, which is exactly what my take on China is like. Similar to America. Deng made a bet that Western capital owners would have more loyalty to profit than their own manufacturing industries in their own nations, and he was right. Exactly.
Controlled Hong Kong, which at the time was thriving because of its hardcore capitalistic economy. Deng Xiaoping designated this little town as, quote, a special economic zone, where foreign companies could set up and invest in a very capitalistic free market. Hong Kong would sort of act as a bridge between Western businesses and this little gateway into communist China. It was still socialism, but with some Chinese capitalistic characteristics. What happens next is arguably the most mind-blowing economic miracle ever to have taken place on planet Earth. This little sleepy village that was the special economic zone in China exploded from
we already watched
global
this, sorry.
GDP. It became the world's factory. China joined this trend of other Asian economies and eventually passed them up to become the second largest economy on Earth. You can see this in a graph. This year, Asia will actually pass the rest of the world in accounting for more than 50% of global GDP. It is a massive economic transformation, and it explains why China has become so powerful. Okay, but wait. This is a very wonderful story about capitalism and its ability to lift millions of people out of poverty and to industrialize a country seemingly overnight. But there's another side to this coin that we need to talk about. I have two graphs I want to show you. They look like this. Okay, let's look at this one first. It's called the elephant graph. Do you sort of see why? Let's deconstruct this graph and try to understand what this says about the past 30 years of the rise of China. On this axis is everyone on Earth, ranked by their income, grouped into percentiles. So these people down here make an income that is the 10th percentile, the lowest 10% in the world, and then the 20th percentile, and so on, up to these people up here who are the richest in the world. They have an income that puts them in the 90th percentile. This axis here shows how much growth in income these people have had over the past 35 years. Basically during the heyday of shareholder capitalism and the rise of China. So you'll see how this plays out in just a second. Let's start plotting how much income growth each of these groups saw over the past 35 years. The bottom 10% saw their incomes grow by around 75%. Not bad. These are people who live in the poorest countries, who make the lowest income in the world. The 20 to 30 percentile saw huge growth in their income, 125% and more over the past 35 years. This is like the new middle class in China and other Asian countries who saw huge income growth due to globalization. They did really well under this system. But then you start to get to the people in the 50th and 60th and 70th and 80th percentile. This is basically people who live in the middle class in the West. Their incomes have grown much slower, sometimes under 50% over the course of 35 years, which is little over 1% a year. Not very much income growth. And some of these people in the West have seen their incomes shrink, like the blue-collar workers in Detroit and the Rust Belt whose jobs disappeared to China. So far you can sort of see why this makes sense. The people in China who benefited from this mass industrialization saw huge benefits. And the people here in the United States and in the West who saw jobs go overseas to China saw a way slower growth in their income. But watch what happens next when we get
That was the dang bet that paid off.
To the groups of people who are at the 99 percentile, basically the richest 1% in the world. And for this, I actually have to stretch out the graph to get us a little bit more granular. These are the people who have the highest incomes in the world. Let's see how their income has grown over the past 35 years. You can see that their income has exploded under this system. They're seeing tripling of their income in the past 35 years. Now, a reminder that this is 35 years of data from every economy on Earth. This shows everyone on the planet. So this gives us a view of who are the winners and the losers of this shareholder capitalism that has globalized to Asia and around the world.
I wonder who are the winners and losers in that. The same dynamic plays itself out in every fucking facet of our lives, dude. The exact same dynamic. Everywhere. I saw the dude that trolled New York Post. I'll show that clip in a second. Our lives, your upper class. I want to fucking die, dude. It's just like there's no way. I will never win. I will never fucking win going forward. It's done. It's such a fucking easy fucking thing to say. Just like, dude, you're right, dude. You're right. Okay, I'm in the top 1% of the 1%. I'm gonna be fucking fine. I'm just gonna play video games going forward. Okay, fuck the poors. I'm putting all my money in a goddamn hedge fund, and I'm just riding the wave, baby. There's no reason to ever fucking talk about any sort of issue going forward, dude. No, dude, you fucking hit a hot streak, you get lucky, you work very hard, you get to a certain point, so that eliminates any fucking point that you've ever had, ever. Thank you, Mom. Yeah. It's over. There's no reason for me to talk about these issues going forward. It doesn't fucking impact me, right? I'm a fucking billionaire, dude.
The top 1% of income earners saw the biggest benefits from this system. They are the ones who disproportionately benefit from shareholder capitalism and the growth of globalization. Okay, so that's my first graph. It's the elephant graph. It is a very useful way to see one of the results of this version of capitalism and the growth of China. The second graph looks like this. This shows the amount of CO2 emissions by country. You've got Europe and the United States, and then up here you've got China, the world's largest emitter of CO2. Like the elephant graph, this graph combines loads of data to show us that shareholder capitalism focuses so much on short-term profits for shareholders that it leaves out any consideration for how this economic activity affects the planet we live on and our ability to live on it. I know you've heard this message a bunch, and if you're like me, it is hard to not become sort of numb to this impending crisis that we don't really know what it looks like, and it feels like there's nothing we can do, but we have to do everything really quickly. But let me just reiterate in my own words that it is now a certain fact that our global climate is changing in such a way that it will very likely lead to immense shifts on our Earth and our ability to live on our Earth. It's already happening, it will continue to happen, and all we can do now is maybe put on the brakes a little bit.
My mom made it.
Okay, let me just wrap this up and give you my final thought on what this all means. I'm not showing you all these graphs because I'm just like a data nerd who loves to look at graphs, although I kind of am. Sorry. I'm showing you these graphs because the story of the rise of China is often a story of how capitalism has pulled tens and hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. And it has, and that's amazing. But these graphs give us a view of what it has also done, what this version of capitalism also incentivizes and results in. If we're going to consider the effects of this version of capitalism, we have to look at all of its effects, not just some of them. So, what's the solution? Is it socialism? No, it's not. It is simply a new version of capitalism, a reframing of how we think about business and globalization, one that old Milton Friedman would despise, and one that more and more businesses are actually realizing we must adopt. The solution isn't to scrap capitalism altogether, but instead to expand it. To not just focus on shareholders and delivering them short-term profits as quickly and as efficiently as possible, but to also focus on other people who are affected by the business. You can call these stakeholders. This is like the customer.
Bro, this is so stupid because this is exactly the fucking letter that CEOs wrote. Like last year. Was it last year? Do you guys know what I'm talking about? There was a CEO collective letter that was sent out talking about exactly this. We need to move away because, I mean, they were talking about this at Davos, and like billionaires and millionaires recognize that the pitchforks are out. Okay? They see what is going on around them. If you pay attention to the things that they talk about, they constantly talk about how economic inequality is a massive problem and blah, blah, blah. All this shit is just a way to mitigate that while while still milking you dry as best as they can. It's not the inequality that's at fault here. It's you recognizing the conditions in which you exist, and that's a problem. So they're saying like they wrote a letter talking about how we're no longer going to put like the profits of our shareholders as the primary function under capitalist companies and whatever, but instead we're going to look at our stakeholders. Exactly the same words that he used as well in this video. It's bullshit. It's not going to fucking happen. Bullshit.
And the suppliers and the employees and the government and the overall economy and the planet and, of course, shareholders. This is called stakeholder capitalism, and it's basically just an acknowledgement that businesses that focus only on profits for shareholders don't end up benefiting everyone. There are winners and losers. It's not good for a huge swath of the population. nor for the changing climate. Oh, and by the way, this isn't some fringe liberal idea. Some of the biggest companies here in the United States, like Walmart, Apple, JP Morgan, have signed on to adopting a new model of capitalism. This is changing, and
Yeah, exactly what I just said. Except the difference is I use that as a criticism. He's using that as like a reason why this is going to happen.
in the next 5 to 10 years, I believe we will see a new version of how businesses interact in the economy. So you're probably wondering, listen, I clicked on a video about the rise of China, and we're ending here with stakeholder capitalism. The rise of China is a story of capitalism, a certain version of capitalism. It's a story about how capitalism can morph and change depending on what effects we want businesses to play in our society. If we want to produce the most amount of wealth in the most efficient way, then the old shareholder model actually really works well for that. But if you want businesses to benefit everyone, including our children and our grandchildren and their ability to live on this planet, then our capitalism needs to pull in more priorities than just profits for shareholders.
Dude, this is so dumb. Relying on the magnanimous nature of billionaires and CEOs and capital owners is the most idiotic way to achieve that goal, when Johnny Harris and every single fucking person that has like a crumb of empathy recognizes, for example, that countries like Norway and Scandinavian nations and Nordic countries have robust social safety nets. Now, that comes at a fucking price. And the price of that is hard fought. Why does that happen in those countries? Because they at least have collective bargaining power. Okay? That's shit that people have fought for decades. Do you understand? So that didn't happen because Norwegian billionaires are just nicer than fucking American billionaires. We cannot rely on the kindness of billionaires and CEOs. There needs to be a corrective pressure being applied by those who stand to benefit from wealth redistribution. And the only way to achieve that is not by like literally reading a fucking dumbass letter that, you know, the Waltons wrote. The only way to achieve that is by organizing. It's so dumb. There's no way. Like, if these billionaires were so fucking kind, there would be no need for philanthropy. Okay? If they were so kind, there would be no profits. Or very little profits. If they were so kind, there would be no homeless people, because every fraction of wealth would be distributed appropriately already. It'd be given to the fucking government, or it would be given back to the workers. It would be distributed back to the workers who are generating that profit. So, no, I don't think that like the Waltons are legitimately on board with this stakeholder capitalism. It's no different than Walmart literally throwing up the black fist and saying Black lives do matter, while underpaying the shit out of their employers or out of their employees, and a large percentage of them being black, you know what I mean, and brown, or literally taking the fucking profits that those black and brown employees generate for them, and white employees and just poor people in general generate for them, and then funding the police departments in those very same neighborhoods. So miss me with this fucking Black Lives Matter shit from Walmart. Just like them saying this about stakeholder capitalism while still simultaneously beefing up, ALEC and all these like Republican initiatives, or even Democratic initiatives that center around deregulation. Or why are you guys saying clip it and ship it? What did I say? Anyway, as I was saying, it's bullshit. Okay? It's bullshit. It's just lip service. And the only reason why they're doing this lip service is because it's not because of the wealth disparity. It's because you're aware of the wealth disparity and you're starting to get upset about it.
What may be right for one stage in the development of an economy may not be right for another stage.
The so-called greenhouse effect is created by carbon dioxide, a colorless, odorless gas.
So I got to dig through a lot of data for this video. and I was able to partner with the World Economic Forum, which is a think tank that I respect. They actually pioneered this idea of stakeholder capitalism decades ago, well before Apple and Walmart realized that it was a good idea. The head of the World Economic Forum just launched a book called literally Stakeholder Capitalism. It's an in-depth look at not only the rise of Asia and China, but also other major trends that help us understand the need to upgrade our capitalism. The book is really good. It's packed with useful information and graphics. It's easy to read and to comprehend. I'm going to put a link in the description where you can learn more. It is available for you to purchase now if you want to get a deeper look into.
He did such a great video on the Iraq War that I was like, damn, Johnny's kind of based. This is typical. I mean, this is typical, like, liberal sock them shit that well-intentioned social democrats advocate for, and it's still on the right side, I guess, but it's well-intentioned, but it's not going to happen in real life.